Okay, audience, I've got a homework assignment for you, but it's an exceedingly easy one, so don't go getting your knickers in a twist or anything. The next time you see professional blithering ignoramus and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley on television, take a close look at the left side of his chest. Marvel at how many ribbons and decorations he has. So many that there are 7 rows of them, which he has to offset twice in order that some of them don't get buried under the lapel of his jacket. Next, take a look at a picture of any of the great American generals of the last 160 years who have commanded our biggest armies on the battlefield and won the greatest victories in our military history. Ulysses S. Grant, William T. Sherman, John J. Pershing, Douglas MacArthur, George S. Patton, Omar Bradley, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and so on. In comparing the photographs of these different generals, you may notice a strange discrepancy. General Mark Milley, who has spent a grand total of 2 days of his military career in combat, during the invasion of Panama in 1989, the operation in which we deposed and captured General Noriega, and who has just overseen the first honest-to-God retreat in the history of the U.S. Armed Forces, that guy has got at least 3 times as much fruit salad on his chest as any of the great generals of our history. The men who actually won the battles and the wars that conferred upon our country the geopolitical prestige it has enjoyed for the past 100 years, and much of which General Milley and his boss, the corpse of former segregationist Senator Joe Biden, has now pissed away for no damn good reason with our disordered, tail-between-legs withdrawal from Afghanistan. And yes, I know some of you are looking askance at me right now due to my description of Afghanistan as the first retreat in U.S. military history, because my audience is the smartest and most historically literate audience on the entire interwebs. So I know there are those of you who heard that and said, wait, what about the Philippines in January 1942? So please allow me to explain the difference as I see it. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, and specifically the middle-of-the-night bug-out from Bagram Air Base, while abandoning hundreds of thousands of small arms, thousands of vehicles, hundreds of aircraft, millions of rounds of ammunition, and innumerable pieces of other assorted materiel, which we did without notifying any of our Afghan partners or even the local civilians who worked at the base. It was quite simply the most disordered act of cowardly retreat in our entire military history. You can't call it a strategic withdrawal because we weren't moving to a more defensible location. We were actually moving to a less defensible location, and our military and civilian leadership knew perfectly well that all these weapons, all these vehicles, all this equipment, and all this ammunition, in addition to the installation itself, would be in the hands of our enemy within less than half a day. We couldn't even be bothered placing a phone call to the Afghan commander and saying, hey, we're bugging out of Bagram and we're leaving all our gear behind. So please send some guys over to secure it for your own use so it doesn't fall into the hands of the Taliban. Nope. We just left in the middle of the night like a bunch of ridiculous cowards. All the real-world consequences be damned. That's why it can and should be called a retreat. I'm actually fighting the urge to call it a rout. But it's not a rout because the enemy never prevailed on the battlefield. We just declared our own defeat and sneaked away under cover of darkness. Because what a proud addition that is to the pantheon of American military greatness. Maybe they'll make a battle streamer for it, colored all bright yellow, and Milley will have a nice fancy new ribbon to wear on his chest. In the Philippines, there was no cowardly retreat. There was a strategic withdrawal followed by a necessary capitulation. A strategic withdrawal means you fall back to a more tactically defensible position while fighting an effective rearguard action because you're facing a numerically superior and better equipped force and you're trying to give your men a fighting chance. That is what happened in the Philippines. MacArthur was the commander of our forces in the Philippines, in addition to also being a field marshal in the Philippine Army. And if you ever wondered why he wore the funny hat, that's why. But the White House decided they didn't want him to be a captive of the Japanese, so he was ordered to evacuate to Australia, and General Jonathan Wainwright drew the unenviable task of being his relief, looking at an unwinnable campaign against a vastly superior enemy force. And Wainwright, after the initial strategic withdrawal, wound up being the man who surrendered the Philippines to the Japanese Imperial Army, after which he and his men got to make the Bataan Death March, after which the survivors, General Wainwright included, because he refused to undergo any fewer privations than his men were suffering, got to spend the next 3 3/4 years as prisoners of war. If you've ever seen the footage of the Japanese surrender aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay on 3 September 1945, while General MacArthur is signing on behalf of the United States, you may have noticed 2 gaunt, frail-looking figures standing to his immediate left. The one was General Arthur Percival, the British commander in Singapore, who had similarly capitulated and who had also just been freed from captivity, and the other was General Jonathan Wainwright, who came out of the POW camp weighing barely 100 pounds and would only survive for another 8 years, ultimately dying in 1953, aged 70. Now, for his conduct in the impossible circumstances that led up to the surrender of the Philippines and his conduct as a prisoner of war, General Wainwright was awarded the Medal of Honor. But he never had near as many ribbons on his chest as Mark Milley does, who spent 2 days in combat, came out without a scratch, and has spent the entire rest of his career as a staff officer. I'm not done with General Milley yet, but the opening segment's getting away from me, so let's hit the music and pick it up on the flip side. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where strategic withdrawal means taking a step back so you can get more leverage when you thrust your sword into the heart of your enemy. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. Happy Labor Day. I hope you were able to spend it among friends and family without a religious face covering in sight. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And my military contacts tell me there are a couple different names for this phenomenon whereby political generals who have only ever barely dipped their toe into the waters of combat, if at all, wind up with more fruit salad on their chest than was ever sported by our great battlefield generals of yore. The polite term for it is medal inflation, where we've taken decorations that are supposed to be reserved for actions in combat in the face of the enemy and turned them into so many meaningless participation trophies. So if you're a general, a career staff officer who's completed one administrative assignment and you're moving on to another, then you get a standard package of decorations, say a Bronze Star, a Distinguished Service Cross, and a Meritorious Service Medal, or something like that. It doesn't matter how good or bad you were at the job you're leaving. You just have to complete the assignment and remain alive, and you get the standard package of decorations and all the new fruit salad that accompanies it. So just for fun, let's run down the list of all the decorations that General Mark Milley, author of the most humiliating retreat in U.S. military history, proudly wears on his jacket. Defense Distinguished Service Medal, Army Distinguished Service Medal, Defense Superior Service Medal, Legion of Merit, Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medal. I feel like I need to stop here and ask, what the hell is the difference between Distinguished Service, Superior Service, and Meritorious Service? If anybody knows, please tell me in the comments. Army Commendation Medal, Army Achievement Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, Afghanistan Campaign Medal, Iraq Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Korea Defense Service Medal, Humanitarian Service Medal, Army Service Ribbon, Army Overseas Service Ribbon, NATO Medal, Multinational Force and Observers Medal, and last but not least, well, I guess it is least actually, the French National Order of Merit. Where he picked that up, I don't have the faintest idea. But there's another less polite term for this phenomenon that I've been informed of, and it's called chesticles. That is to say, instead of actually winning wars, instead of focusing on defeating the enemy, seeing him driven before us, and hearing the lamentations of his women, We just sit around inventing a bunch of participation trophies so dumbasses like Mark Milley will have a whole shitload of ribbons to wear around. Bear in mind, this is the same General Mark Milley who, before he had carved his own face on the Mount Rushmore of military infamy by screwing the Afghanistan pooch just about every way a pooch can be screwed, told the U.S. Senate that his greatest priority as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was understanding white rage. He gave this answer in response to a question from Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas about why he had released a list of suggested reading materials for junior Army officers that included ridiculous trash like How to Be an Anti-Racist by Henry Rogers. Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. His first explanation was, well, critical race theory is a theory that's out there, so I want my officers to be well read. And then he dug an even deeper intellectual foxhole for himself by adding, well, I've read Karl Marx and Chairman Mao, but I'm not a communist. Which I'm guessing is a lie, but whatever. Pressed further by Senator Cotton on the fact that the Henry Rogers book, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, is basically kindergarten-level racist Marxism that no grown adult with a functioning prefrontal cortex can possibly take seriously, General Milley finally conceded, I may have to familiarize myself with what's in the theory. In other words, this idiot spent probably 2 minutes doing a Google search for the fashionable woke bullshit books of the moment. The books nobody actually reads, they just exist so guilty, self-flagellating white liberal morons can strategically position them on their home bookshelf so their woke dinner guests will know that they're pretending to read all the right books. Then he right-clicked, hit copy, and then paste, and boom. There is your suggested reading list for impressionable young Army officers straight from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is the man who is the top uniformed military commander in the U.S. Armed Forces. So here's another question I want you to ask yourself the next time you see this blithering buffoon on your TV screen. Can you picture this guy leading men in battle? Can you picture this guy displaying personal bravery in the face of the enemy? Because personally, I can't picture this guy successfully managing a Burger King for the duration of an 8-hour shift. He probably would wind up handing over the cash register and surrendering the store to a local street gang, because that's the same fucking thing his dumbass just did in Afghanistan. Our armed forces are full of exceptional young men and women who are really good at their jobs, who do possess personal bravery, who are fully capable of heroic action in the face of the enemy above and beyond the call of duty. We just lost 13 of them at the Kabul airport a couple weeks ago, and each one of those men and women had more talent and courage in their goddamn pinky fingernail than Mark Milley could ever dream of possessing, no matter how many stupid participation ribbons you pin on his chest. In his farewell address of 17 January 1961, 3 days before he left the presidency and ended his public career, President and General Dwight Eisenhower delivered a stern warning to his countrymen about the dangers of a military-industrial complex. We are seeing, right now, in the third decade of the 21st century, the realization, the worst-case scenario of the exact thing that President Eisenhower was trying to warn us about. We have political generals with no military or leadership skills of which to speak, running our armed forces, carrying out the orders of an idiot commander-in-chief whose mind is clouded by dementia and who was never an exceptional or talented man to begin with. And to what end are they doing it? Well, look no farther than the current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. That guy has lived the same dream that Mark Milley is trying to live. Just get through your active duty career, learn to vomit out the fashionable political catchphrases of the day, take really good care of the defense contractors, and then boom. When you get to retirement age, there's a nice, cushy, 7-figure job waiting for you at Raytheon or McDonnell Douglas or Boeing or Northrop Grumman. Successfully navigate the political battlefield, and then you get to cash in your lottery ticket at the end and start making yourself some real money. And this is the exact thing that Eisenhower was trying to warn us about, and we did not listen. If it had been known ahead of time that Afghanistan was going to wind up being a 20-year-long engagement, would any American have supported going in there, even in October of 2001 with the wounds of 9/11 still open and bleeding? I sure as hell doubt it. But to the defense contractors, to the military-industrial complex, to people like Vice President Dick Cheney, who sat on the board of more than one of those same defense contractors, a 20-year engagement for them is something akin to a wet dream. It makes them swoon. You mean we can have an open-ended engagement with no actual mission objectives where we can spend as much money as we want and nobody's even going to keep track? Where we can drop $20 million on the ground and we don't even have to bend over and pick it up? Holy shit, we're all going to be filthy rich. Now, if he had 1 ounce of honor as a military man, Mark Milley would have resigned in disgrace about 3 weeks ago. And if our president had 1 ounce of honor as our commander-in-chief, he would have fired Milley's ass and Austin's ass and his idiot national security advisor and his idiot secretary of state and his idiot self. But astoundingly, the White House is on record as saying nobody is going to get fired over any of this, the worst debacle and most humiliating retreat in the history of the U.S. Armed Forces. I want to close tonight by talking briefly about Brevet Major General George Armstrong Custer, who was Lieutenant Colonel Custer in the regular army. Since about 50 years ago or so, the fashionable historiography says we're never supposed to speak favorably about Custer. We're supposed to view him as a vain, narcissistic sociopath whose outsized sense of self caused him to blunder into a hopeless engagement where he got all himself and all of his men killed. And sure, there may be some amount of merit in that assessment of Custer's character. But it probably is too simplistic and convenient to have much of a relationship with the truth. Nobody will ever know for sure exactly what events transpired during the last couple of hours of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, because nobody in Custer's detachment lived to give an accounting of those events. But there does exist a very strong possibility that Custer, seeing that he was wildly outnumbered by an enemy force whose true size he had never contemplated, had a reasonable opportunity to make an orderly withdrawal, to regroup, and to fight another day. So was it just ego and vaingloriousness that caused him to stand and fight to the end of a battle he knew he couldn't win? Or did he choose to stand and fight because he was a U.S. Army commander, and the U.S. Army doesn't retreat? It's easy to say Custer was just a blustering dumbass who blundered his way into his own death and the death of everyone in his command. That's been the fashionable view among historians since before I was born. And George Custer's executive officer that day, 25 June 1876, was Captain Tom Custer, his own younger brother. And if you look at a picture of Tom Custer, you'll notice he wears 2 medals of honor on his chest. He was the first American to win that award twice, and he remains today one of only 19 men so decorated. So I guess, say whatever you want about the perceived character flaws of George Custer, but Tom Custer is not known to have been an egomaniac or a glory seeker. He was just an American soldier with a verified track record of displaying courage and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty, as the 2 medals of honor on his chest in those old photographs attest. So did the Custer brothers die that day and let everyone under their command die that day because they were seeking glory for themselves? Or did they go willingly to their own deaths, fighting until the last bullet was spent because they decided that upholding the finest traditions of the U.S. Army was more important than remaining alive? Mark Milley carries more decorations on his chest than either of the Custer brothers did, more than any of our generals from the Civil War, or the Spanish-American War, the First World War, the Second World War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, either of the Iraq Wars. And what's the most difficult decision he ever had to make? Whether to pander to the Democrats or the Republicans? Which defense contractor he wants to go work for after retirement? Whether to go to the bathroom before the next video conference? When that guy looks at himself in the mirror, I wonder if he ever feels ashamed that he carries more decorations than all the men before him who displayed real courage on the battlefield, who laid down their lives to uphold the finest traditions of the U.S. military. Now, when he inevitably matriculates to his fabulously well-paid job with one of the defense contractors he's taken such good care of, I hope the money is enough to assuage his conscience. Thanks for watching. Hope you had a pleasant Labor Day weekend. See you Wednesday. Get off my lawn.